Today is October 9th, and this is Card Central 365 here on STL Sports Central. All content brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Joe Roderick, Brenden Schaeffer with you here. And Brenden, on today's show, I thought we would take a little walk down memory lane because 6 years ago, one of the most fun games I have ever been at, one of the most fun games I've ever had the opportunity to cover, happened down in Georgia, down in Atlanta. It was Game 5 of the 2019 NLDS. If you just bring up the fact, I mean, hey, you remember that game when the Cardinals scored 10 in the first? Yes. I think all Cardinal fans still remember that day fondly. And 6 years, it seems like it was a lot more recent than that, honestly.
Yeah, I guess anytime you invite the COVID into the middle of a timeline, it feels like it's forever ago, but also like it just happened yesterday because you can remember where you were. Obviously a real nail biter of a game. No, it wasn't. And that's what makes it so crazy. It was a nail biter of a series, and you go to a decisive Game 5 and everything that leads into that. You're like, I can remember going into that game thinking, all right, they're just going to have to try to scratch a run or two across early. And man, everything that they were getting in that first inning, it felt like at a certain point in the inning, you go, okay, this game is over. And your jaw is on the floor because you can't believe that the game is actually over before the Braves even got to bat. But it's not the way that you felt about that game going into it. With the way that series had gone, that's, I think, part of what made it so impossible. It didn't compute that was happening for the Cardinals when it was happening. And you change pitchers and you go to another one. It's still the Cardinals are piling on runs. It was absolutely surreal to watch on television, and so I'm sure surreal to be in the building for that game.
Yeah, here's a rundown, Brenden. Here is what that first inning looked like on that day. Dexter Fowler was your leadoff guy, and I'm going to butcher the name of the pitcher for the Braves on this this day. What was it?
Foltynewicz.
Yes, it was. Dexter Fowler leads off with a walk. Ground out.
Started innocently enough.
A bunt ground out by Kolten Wong. So already you have one out. Kolten and
by the way,
Wong.
That shows you they're playing to just try to get a run. They're playing like this is going to be a 2-1 game, and they're like, dude, we got the leadoff base runner on. Bunt him over, get Dexter Fowler into scoring position. We might get a run. That's legitimately how they were playing the inning to start the damn game.
Yeah. It goes from there. Paul Goldschmidt then with a single, it's to the shortstop. Then Marcell Ozuna, Braves legend Marcell Ozuna, singles to right, scores Fowler. Yachty reaches on an error by the first baseman, who would have been Freddie Freeman in that game. Matt Carpenter walks, Tommy Edman doubles. All of this too, it all seems so innocent as all of these are happening.
Until the Edman double, there really wasn't anything that was, that noteworthy. It was like, it wasn't like an avalanche until you got to that point, and then it started to feel that way. By the way, you talk about how long ago this was. Paul the Young intentionally walked. That's what came next before the pitcher spot comes up. Right? That's like they're giving Paulie D a free base in the middle of this when you're like, they're still playing it like, hey, we're gonna max this out. We're gonna limit the damage here.
Yeah.
Surreal to look at this box score again.
Jack Flaherty then walks with the bases loaded. Dexter Fowler doubles, Kolten Wong doubles. Before a line out by Paul Goldschmidt finally to get the second out of the inning. Then Marcell Ozuna strikes out, but wait, the ball gets away from the catcher to score Kolten Wong and put Ozuna on first base before Yachty finally grounds out to end the inning with a score then of 10-0. The Cardinals started the game with a 53% chance to win. That was what the odds were at the start of the game. They had a 53% chance to win. They ended the first inning with a 98% chance to win the game before the Braves ever got an at-bat.
It's unbelievable. That when has that ever happened that you could say before one of the teams got to bat that the playoff game was over. The series deciding playoff game was over, and it wasn't hyperbole to say that it was over. It was done. I can remember thinking, Jack Flaherty hasn't thrown a pitch yet. There's no reason not to do a bullpen game here and throw him in game 1 of the NLCS. Like I was wondering if they would consider doing that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because the Cardinals, if you did remember, did make a move in the game that kind of is really unprecedented. Get to that in just a bit, but remember that all content here on STL Sports Central brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours, and on December 1st is when we launch the DraftKings Sportsbook in Missouri. New customers can get $300 in bonus bets when we launch on December 1st with your $5 bet when we go live. That's just a $5 bet using promo code STL Sports. That's code STL Sports to grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet when we go live on December 1st. That's code STL Sports in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Excludes customers who redeem pre-launch sign-up offer. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. So back to, you mentioned that before Jack Flaherty even throws a pitch. I remember we were sitting there and you weren't there, right? Were you down there at that one?
I covered the other 2 games in that series in Atlanta, but then I flew back. I was actually living in Texas at the time, and I didn't fly back for just game 5 because I knew at that point that I was going to the NLCS to cover it. And I don't remember if we already knew if it was I don't think we knew that it was the Nationals yet for sure. I think the Dodgers and the Nationals played either that night or the next day, whatever it was, because I remember knowing the Cardinals were advancing. I was hanging out with a buddy that night, and I believe that was the night of the Dodgers Nationals having an absolutely wild game, maybe misremembering some of the details, but it was like, am I going to DC or am I going to Los Angeles? I knew I was going to be covering some road games in that series, but no, I was not for game 5 because I knew I was saving the funds to go with KMOV at the time to go to 2019 NLCS.
Well, yeah. So you're sitting out there, and again, it's the first inning hasn't even ended yet, and already we're talking in the auxiliary press box out there in the Hank Aaron suites,
which I've now been to. Now that I was at the All-Star game this year, so I know what you're talking about.
So you're sitting. I mean, it's like, okay, are they going to throw Jack Flaherty? Like, is this going to happen? Are they going to warm somebody up? Like, he's already warm up. Do you at least just throw him an inning and get him the heck out of there? Like, how do you approach this? And then you look out there in the bottom of the first inning, and Harrison Bader's in the game. Harrison Bader was not in the starting lineup, and suddenly Harrison Bader is out in the outfield. And you're looking at this, you're like, okay, did somebody get hurt? Like, what's happening here in this moment? And find out after the game, talking to Matt Carpenter about it. And Matt Carpenter goes and pulls himself from the game, goes up to Mike Shildt in that moment and says, hey, take me out of the game. Like, we have 10 runs. We need defense.
Hands
take my
team.
glove out. Yeah.
Get the hands team in for the bottom of the first. That's right. Has that ever happened? There's no way that's ever happened in a game other than the one we're talking about in the playoffs in a decisive game that you go, yep, we're going to sub for defense. Normally you see that in the 8th inning, right? Guy takes his last at bat. Oh, he's probably not going to bat again. Carpenter's like, we need Bader's glove in center field. That's the only way we lose this game is some crazy stuff happening on defense. Get him in there. I love it.
The only other thing that I think is even comparable, at least in Cardinal history, if you remember Mark McGwire's last season with the Cardinals, when La Russa would bat him second in the lineup, he'd get that at bat in the first inning and then immediately be taken out of the game. So it was like, hey, we have our one bullet with Mark McGwire. We're going to let him swing for the fences, but we know that he is providing absolutely nothing else to us in this game outside of that one at bat, and we're getting him the heck out of there. Like, that's the only other thing that I can think that would even be somewhat comparable to this.
Which is crazy. And I would have been, that was like, what, 2001. So I would have been like 7 years old and not locked in on the managerial moves. But
I think
I'm
even
just trying
before
to
that,
think of
I think that's 2000 is when that would have happened.
2000, whatever. Yeah. Whatever it was. That's interesting though that they did that instead of letting him pinch hit. I guess he was just ready to go home. I don't know. I know he was kind of broken down there toward the end. 2001 was his final season. So even as a 7-year-old, I did have the year clocked correctly. But yeah, that and of course that was, that probably not playoff scenario that we're talking about. Did they do that in the playoffs? That would be bizarre to me if they did. But no, for that to be happening in a decisive game 5 of an NLDS, and it was the right move again. And it's not like the Cardinals hit a bunch of home runs. Did they have a home run? I don't guess they did in that first inning. They did it with
Not
walks.
the first inning, no.
They did it with intentional walks. They did it with drop third strikes. They did it with singles and doubles, and that's how they did it against two different pitchers. I mean, just unthinkable that happened the way that it did. But at some point, you were like, yeah, this game's over, and you just have to kind of ride it out. And they ultimately end up throwing Jack Flaherty like 6 innings. I want to say he went pretty deep into the game, and it was clear that they were like, that's the thing that we're not going to do is like count our chickens, even up 10-0. This is still a decisive game to move on to the NLCS. And so Jack Flaherty's going to throw 5 or 6 innings and throw up the zeros as he was able to do. It's just crazy to think about. I was trying to look up now the numbers for Foltynewicz in that season because he didn't have a great regular season, but I can just remember thinking like they've got bullets in the bullpen. They're certainly going to try to limit the Cardinals here. And so for it to unfold the way that it did, and again, it's noteworthy to me that they're bunting the second batter of the game. That's not a game that as a manager you think is going to end 8-7. If you're bunting to try to, sacrifice an out to get a run in the very beginning of that game, it just, that was not the expected script. Looking it up for Foltynewicz, he had a great September that year, despite not having a great overall season. And that was the first time we saw him. He had a great game 2. I knew there had to be something that I was misremembering. Foltynewicz, game 2 of that series, shoved it on the Cardinals in a 3-0 Braves win. 7 innings, no runs, 7 strikeouts, 3 hits, no walks. And so you're facing him for game 5. That's why Mike Shildt is bunting with Kolten Wong for the second batter of the game, because you're like, we couldn't touch this guy when we played him a few days ago. We have to do whatever we can to get to him here. And if it's a run, it's a run, and we'll try to let Jack Flaherty have that hold up. And for like you to give up that out in the inning and still have that, like if Kolten Wong swings away, does he ground into a double play and the whole thing doesn't happen? It's almost like the surrender bunt ends up butterfly effect. You don't want to change a thing, but you did give up an extra out there before all the fun even really got started, which is crazy to think about too.
Yeah, it was it's a fun game to be at. It's a fun one to still talk about today, as again, it's something that we kind of are Cardinal focused here with that. But again, tell me a time that this happened in baseball history and you can't do it. So it just makes it that much fun to talk about here on a local level and look back and remember what that was.
And that was the last Cardinals playoff win, right? They didn't win a game in the NLCS, did they? Or they win one?
They were swept. They have won a game since then. They did
right.
win. Remember, they won game 1 against the Padres in 2020. That is, that's the last series. That's the last playoff series that they have won, though. Was that on this day in 2019? Yeah. So
yeah, because it was the wild card game, singular game in 2021 where they lost to the Dodgers, which randomly I was in Washington, D.C. for that as well. Wasn't flying out to Los Angeles, but if they advanced, I was going to go cover some games. And we had planned a trip to Washington, D.C. that I didn't think was going to interfere. I don't know how early we had planned that in 21 to where like it would have been something to go, probably should be ready to cover playoff games. But 2019, they win that game. They go on to face the Nationals, and they just don't show up at all for that series. I was covering those road games in Washington, D.C., and the Cardinals actually gave me a gift there in the way that they didn't do anything at all during those games in D.C. they lost in straight sets. And so I had that Wednesday or whatever it was before having to fly out the next morning real early to just kind of explore Washington, D.C. without having any baseball to cover. I thought I was going to be in it for the long haul, covering 3 games in that series, but it didn't end up happening that way because the Cardinals fell for pretty flat. I think it was Gerardo Parra. Was that the guy that had the Baby Shark walk up music for the Nationals that year?
Yeah.
And they did the whole Baby Shark thing. And I know this was supposed to be like a happy revisiting, but now I'm revisiting what happened the rest of that season. I will say, man, of all the things that I've seen in covering sports, and if the Cardinals were more competitive in the years that I've been doing this, I'd probably have seen even more than I have. But it was bizarre and almost kind of eerie to see how much a whole stadium doing Baby Shark for a guy was actually pretty freaking intimidating. Like they got after it for that guy, and he wasn't like starting, and so it was like, oh, are we going to get to do it because he's coming off the bench? And it was like South Carolina doing Sandstorm. It was like Rocky Top at Neyland Stadium. These people are doing Baby Shark, and it's like, dude, this is a vibe right now. I will never forget that for as long as I live. That song shouldn't have felt that way, but it absolutely did.
That was before the era of closers getting WWE-like entrances. Like, sure, you had Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera with like their songs to come into, and I remember Jason Mott, come into Green Day back in the day, but like, they weren't turning the light, they weren't doing a light show, they weren't doing all of that, to where today, like now they have to do it. And the Phillies, Johan Duran's getting booed because the Phillies fans are like, what are you doing? Like the 2 games in a row that we're having, an entrance when we're losing for this. Like, this isn't what the entrance is for. It's
you gotta save that for for when you're in the lead, I think.
Yeah. So the Phillies bring that out in games 1 and 2 and get booed. Yeah, you can't do that in Philadelphia of all places too. You can't do that, and they're going to get booed. They're going to boo their own for that. So, all right, more
That's
revisiting
a situation for sure.
Right. More revisiting as we go on this month. This was a fun one though, as we looked back at the Game 5 of the NLDS back in 2019. The 10-run inning. That's all you got to say. Hey, you remember the 10-run inning, and boom, people immediately know exactly what you're talking about. And it happened 6 years ago today. For Brenden Schaeffer, I'm Joe Roderick. This is STL Sports Central.